Hello Crafty Llamas, in this video I'll be showing you how to knit a scrunchie. So for this what you're going to need is, I'm using 4-ply yarn because it's a very sturdy yarn and it's going to work quite well. You can do this realistically with any weight yarn. I've got my 2.5mm higher steel tips. These are their 4-inch tips, so they're a little bit shorter. And then I have my scrunchie band, so my hair tie. So I'm kind of making this pattern up because it's in my head and it makes sense. So I will write a blog to go with this, which I'll pop on the website once our website is live. For now, it's just going to be the video, but once the website is live, I'll pop it in the description so you can see the written pattern as well. But yeah, so let's get going. Get your corresponding needles, and you don't need a circular needle. You can do it on flat needles if you want, on straight needles. I use interchangeables because that's all I knit with now. I don't knit with any other kind of needles except occasionally DPNs or flexible DPNs. And yeah, so here's my yarn. So this is Noodle Soup's Inky Tincture. We used to sell this a little while ago. We have sold out, unfortunately, but this is a really nice 4-ply sock yarn. So here we are. So you're going to start off by casting on, realistically it's as many stitches as you need to kind of surround your bobble, and a few extra to kind of create that nice scrunchy look. I'm going to go for 80 stitches. If you're using a chunky yarn, you will need fewer stitches. If you are using a 4-ply, you can go up to kind of as many as 100 stitches depending on how folded you want the scrunchie to look. It's completely up to you. So here we are. I'm going to be using the cable cast on method. I do have a video for this, which I'll also link below for you. I've got my yarn on my needle and I have my working yarn here at the back. So yeah, I'm going to cast on 80 stitches and I will see you back here once I've cast on 80 stitches. This is going to take me a while. Right, so you've joined me here. I've just finished casting on my 80 stitches. What I've done is I had to quickly grab some stitch markers because obviously I always forget about those. And then I've just placed a stitch marker every 20 stitches so that I know exactly how many I've got. Makes it easier to count. And so the next stage is, like I said, this is a really, really simple pattern. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to work in stockinette stitch or stocking stitch for a total of about 8 centimeters. It depends how deep you want your scrunchie to be. So don't forget that this is going to be folded over. So if I get a rule at 8 centimeters, it's here, but it's only going to be to about there. So you're just going to work in stockinette stitch until you get to approximately 8 centimeters or whichever depth you want for your scrunchie. Just remember that it will be folded in half. So if you do a depth of, for example, 3 centimeters, then it's only going to be 1.5 centimeters once it's been put together. So I'm going to aim for about 8 centimeters. I'm not going to keep track of rows and things like that because it completely depends on your gauge, what yarn you're using and what tips you're using. So just carry on going. I'm working in stockinette stitch. I'm on my first one, so I'm just knitting this row. And I am a combination continental knitter, which essentially means I knit through the back loop and I purl through the front loop, as opposing to knitting and purling through the front loops as a continental knitter would. But just knit as you would usually. On my way back, I will be knitting or I will be purling through the back loop to create a smooth stockinette stitch rather than a twisted stockinette, which can often happen with combination knitters. But don't worry about that, there is a video on it if you are interested. But I'm not going to go into the details now. But yeah, so this is a really simple pattern. It's great for using up scrap yarn. It only uses of sock yarn about 20 grams, so it's perfect for kind of like mini skeins if you're part of like a skein club or anything like that. It's perfect for anything like that. or leftover yarn from a sock project or mittens or whatever it is that you've been making with 4-ply. If you've got a little bit left over, then you can always make a scrunchie. These are also great for gifts. So if you've got a little girl in the family or a little boy, these make wonderful little decorative gifts, and you can kind of spruce up an old hairband and just give it something a little bit extra, really, just make it a little bit more fun. And obviously you can pretty much use any kind of hairband that you want. I'm using a thin one just because that's what I had on my wrist and that's what I decided to film today. So it's really, really easy, very, very simple. And like I said, I've just kind of made this pattern up in my head based on how it's constructed. And you know, the more time you spend knitting, the more, I guess, the easier it is to kind of think of a project and know how to do it. But yeah, so this is a great little one for using up scrap yarns or just kind of as a little gift giver. They're quite simple and easy to do. There's nothing really complex. So it's a nice kind of TV project as well. So you don't really have to concentrate too much on what you're doing, which is always quite nice. And there's also a lot of different things that you can do. It's really easy to customize. So if you wanted to make a striped one, then that'll be really easy. Right, that's the end of my first row. This is going to take me a while to do because obviously 80 stitches on such tiny needles. It's going to take a while, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to purl stitch on my way back, but I'm going to do it through the back loop. There's also a video for that if you are a combination continental knitter. If not, do what you do normally. And if you prefer a twisted stockinette, then go for it. But yeah, so I'll join you in a few more rows so you can kind of see how it's working up. But you basically work this flat for a total of 8 centimeters. I'll do some little bits of video of me knitting it as I go. I'm not going to knit the whole thing because I don't think you need to watch me knit really, really slowly. So I've now got to the point where I have knitted approximately 8 centimeters width up here. As you can see, I have the 80 cast on down this end where my stitch marks are, and then I've just knitted 8 centimeters up. So what I'm going to be doing now is what you need to do now is you need to bind off this top edge, and then you're going to sew them together around your hair bubble. So I'm just going to cast off. So you don't need to do a stretchy bind off or anything like that. You can literally just use a bog standard bind off. Just use whichever one you kind of prefer or whichever one you find most comfortable to use. Just, yeah, whichever you prefer is absolutely fine. Right, so I've just finished binding off. I've just got that one last stitch, so I'm just going to pull up a loop, and I'm going to leave myself loads of really, really long tail because I'm actually going to use this to sew it all together and do all of that. So I've left myself plenty there, and I'm just going to pull that through like so. Oh. Yeah, do be careful when you pull it through because it might bunch a bit. I might have left myself a bit too much, but that's fine. We can always cut it down, but you can't add more on. Right, so that is all pulled through. So I'm going to move my needles out of the way. So don't worry if it rolls a bit. If at this point, if you want, you can block it. It might make it easier for you to sew it up, but you don't have to by any means. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get my hair bubble, which is on my wrist at the moment. It's the one that I use pretty much most days. And as you can see, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to have it so it's right sides facing each other. Just do that, and then I'm just going to roll it like so. This is just so I can get it in the hair bubble nicely. Like that. And then basically what this will do is this will all scrunch up like a scrunchie. And so what I'm going to need to do is, to start with, I'm going to have to sew up the side seams. So you're going to want to sew up these bits here, as you can see. So I'm going to take that hair bubble out. I'm going to get myself a needle here, one of my darning needles. I'm going to go for a medium size. Like that. And I'm I'm not going to use a really long one, I'm going to use the other one. So this is my cast on tail. If you didn't leave yourself much of a cast on tail, then obviously you can just use a bit of yarn and thread it through, or obviously you can use the one that you've just cast off with. For the sake of having to reduce how many ends I have to weave in, I'm just going to use this one for my cast on. So basically you can sew this up however you want really. Don't feel like you've got to do it a specific way, or you've got to do it particularly neatly. So I'm just going to start by sewing this up on the corresponding corner. Here we go. I am doing this inside out, so I've currently got right sides facing with the wrong sides facing me. And I'm basically just going to sew it up like so. Right, just double check that when you're sewing it up that your other end is still going to meet properly. Mine's alright. I just tend to pinch it as I go. If you want, you can also use locking stitch markers like these here to kind of hold your stitches in place so that you know that you're kind of sewing them up equally at a similar sort of rate. I'm just going to flip that inside out, and basically that's how that looks. It's not really too noticeable. Obviously you can see where the colours kind of with a variegated yarn where that seam is just because of the colours, but overall you can't really tell, so I'm quite happy with that. That's what I mean about sewing up. You can't really see it that much, so I don't tend to worry too much, to be honest. Not on little projects like this. But I am very much an imperfectionist, so that's okay. I'm just going to secure that in place, like so. That nice and tight, and I'm just going to snip that about there. Cool, so that's that one. So now you've just got that other seam to do. So this is where you need to put your hair bubble inside. So I'm just going to do that. And this bit is going to be a little bit trickier, so I am actually going to use locking stitch markers for this bit because it is going to be just a little bit more complicated. So essentially what you're going to do is that with your hair bubble. So you can see already that's kind of taken the scrunchie format. So if you wanted kind of more fabric, obviously you'd cast on more stitches, but you can see obviously here it stretches out quite wide, and that will work quite well. So if you do want a scrunchie, just cast on more stitches. I think I've definitely done too much yarn, but I'd rather have too much than too little. But I am going to have a bit of an achy arm, that's for sure. Right, so let's just stick some stitch markers in. Do that just behind. I'm going to sew anti-clockwise. So I'm just going to pinch the fabric together, but not pull it. I'm just going to pop these through both sides of the fabric, just to hold that in place. These ones from my cast on edge as well, just to pop those in. Keep going round, using these stitch markers to hold your fabric. If you're quite an experienced knitter, or you've used provisional cast-ons, you can also, rather than casting off at the end, you can start with a provisional cast-on at the beginning and then finish without binding off, and then you can also sew your provisional cast-on together. I think it's a mattress stitch that you can do with a provisional cast-on, and then that way you can create a really neat edge. So as you can see, I've got to this bit and I've just got this bit of fabric left, like so. I'm just going to use one more. There we go. And that just helps to kind of keep it in place. It'll also give you an idea of the size of your scrunchie. I'm going to make a feature of my kind kind of cast on and cast off as like kind of like a little ridge effect. It's just a little extra detail that you can add really, really easily. So rather than kind of going through the stitches, I'm just going to go underneath that cast off edge and underneath the cast on one. And I'm just going to do that all the way around, just to kind of create that ridge. And I'm just going to add it as like a detail of the scrunchie rather than trying to hide it and make it seamless. Obviously you can make it seamless if you want. And I'm just going to go round, just back and forth, exactly like I did with the seam that I did up the side, just to kind of create this as a featured edge. So the bit that I'm just making sure I'm coming up underneath is obviously you've got that cast off edge here. So I'm just making sure I'm popping up just underneath that stitch. And on the other side, once again, you've got your cast on, for me it's a cable cast on, so just underneath that twisted edge, I'm just making sure I'm coming up underneath that. This bit really can take a little while just because there are quite a lot of stitches. And if you're like me and you left yourself a really long tail, then you've got a lot of yarn to pull through. But as you can see, it creates a nice seal and just a little edge to that. Just adds a little feature, doesn't it? And for something that you didn't really have to put much effort into, it works quite well. Obviously I just moved my stitch markers that I've used to kind of keep my fabric together. As I go, I just move those out of the way. And you can just keep going around. And I'm just going over that, the first few stitches as well, just overlapping to make sure it's nice and secure. There we go. And then I'm just going to thread it through, do a knot. Through into the middle section, so in between my two fabrics, and pop that through further down, just so that my tail is on the inside. Look at that. There we are. Right, so you can either leave it like this as your kind of scrunchie, or what you can try to do is move where the scrunchie sits, so it's now at the inside seam. So if you just pull the outsides like that, you then just make sure your scrunchie sits basically at this end here, like that, and then you can pop that on your wrist, and then there you have a little scrunchie. Hand knitted scrunchie, like so. So if you've got any bits left over from like a jumper, a cardigan, another project, anything like that, you can make a scrunchie. I prefer to have the little detailing on the outside because I think it just adds a little something. There you go, and there you have a little scrunchie. If you want it to be more scrunchy, so obviously you can see the folds here, you just have to cast on more stitches. Obviously, the more stitches you have, the more yarn and the longer it's going to take. If you don't want it as thick, like as deep here, then just don't knit for 8 centimeters, just knit for twice the depth that you would like it to be. So that's it for my scrunchie video. If you've enjoyed this video, please do let me know by commenting below and liking it. We do have weekly videos, so please do subscribe to our channel. Our social media handle is Crafty Llama UK, so you can find us on various platforms using that. Please tag us if you attempt to make a scrunchie using this video, and of course you can purchase all of the tools used today from our shop, which I will link below. That's it for this week's video, but I'll be back with you next week for another one. Bye!